Please, Mom, don't leave me. The child whimpered into the howling wind, his tiny arms wrapped around her limp body. The night raged on, thunder cracking overhead as the boy clung to his unconscious mother inside the freezing cold of an abandoned storage shed. Hours later, a man opened the door and froze. The image before him struck like a lightning bolt through memory. Right there, in that very spot, he had once begged for his own life. Her name was Claire Matthews, a woman who once believed patience could mend anything. She taught part-time art classes, lived simply, believed in kindness, and for 3 long years, she tried to soften herself into the mold of Mark Wallace's perfect wife. 3 years of being polite enough, quiet enough, forgiving enough. 3 years of being a stranger in her own home. But that night, every ounce of warmth she had poured into the Wallace family shattered around her. It was Glendale, October. Rain lashed the windows like nature itself was in mourning. Inside, the fireplace flickered lazily, casting golden light against lavender-scented air. A chandelier swayed gently overhead, and in the middle of that comfort, Claire stood, soaked, frozen, as if winter had climbed straight into her bones. She clutched the fraying strap of a canvas bag. Inside, just a few clothes, a baby bottle half full, and the tiny blanket Ava couldn't sleep without. Her jacket was thin, barely keeping the wind from slicing through her. On the couch, Darlene Wallace sat like a queen on a throne. Impeccable white sweater, legs crossed, a wine glass slowly twirling in her hand. Behind her, Mark stood wordlessly, eyes fixed on the glowing television screen flashing financial headlines. He didn't even glance at Claire. "You can walk out on your own," Darlene said, calmly. "Or I can call the police." Claire took a steady breath. "The kids are asleep." Darlene smiled coldly. "Even better. Easier to carry." Mark shifted at that, but still didn't look her way. Claire turned to him, voice low and clear. "Do you really believe I cheated on you?" Silence. Then, cold as stone, "I'm not even sure those kids are mine." Claire let out a soft, empty laugh. Not bitter, just the laugh of someone who realized the ending came long ago. No more words. Darlene slid a small bag across the table. "A few $100, enough to start over, if you're smart." Claire took it. Her hand didn't shake. She walked upstairs quietly, the wooden floor creaking under her steps. In the dark, Ava clutched her one-eared teddy. Eli still held the hem of Claire's sweater in his sleep like he feared she'd vanish. She lifted them, wrapped them in blankets, and came back down. Through the bare trees, a shed appeared. Worn, forgotten. But in that moment, it looked like shelter, like hope. Claire didn't know how long she had walked. Her vision blurred from exhaustion, from cold, from grief. But as she stumbled inside, with her children pressed close, a strange calm settled over her. And somewhere, far off in another part of the city, a man with a full wallet and an empty past opened the same door and saw the ghost of his own childhood in Claire's eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her children. Then she stepped out. The door clicked shut behind her, softly. Finally, a quiet sound that severed the last thread of what used to be called family. The rain needled the back of her neck like shards of ice. She took off her coat and wrapped it around her children's bare feet, shielding them from the cold steps. Ava buried her face into her mother's shoulder. Eli slept on, still clinging to her collar. Claire didn't know where they were going, only that they couldn't go back. "They will not grow up in a house built on cruelty," she vowed. "If I have to lose everything to keep them safe, then I will." At 9:14 p.m., Claire Matthews was thrown out of her home, 2 children in her arms, a torn canvas bag at her side, and the last flicker of faith in humanity fading fast. No one called her name. No one watched her go. Only the wind remained, lashing against her face with every step. Her feet numbed, her spine ached, but she kept walking. She didn't cry. Tears, she'd learned, didn't warm children or fill empty stomachs. Through the bare trees, a shed appeared, worn, forgotten. But in that moment, it looked like shelter, like hope. Claire didn't know how long she had walked. Her vision blurred from exhaustion, from cold, from grief. But as she stumbled inside with her children pressed close, a strange calm settled over her. And somewhere, far off in another part of the city, a man with a full wallet and an empty past opened the same door and saw the ghost of his own childhood in Claire's eyes. But Claire's heart kept going, beating to the rhythm of a mother who no longer had the luxury of rest. The decayed wooden door creaked under the force of her bruised, frost-bitten hands and finally gave way. Inside, it was pitch black, cold, damp, air thick with the smell of old hay and forgotten things. A place abandoned by time. She stepped in without hesitation. Her eyes didn't need to adjust. Outside had been just as dark. In the corner, she laid Ava and Eli down on a thin pile of brittle straw. It scratched their skin, clung to their clothes and cheeks. Ava whimpered, the cold piercing too deep for her young body to handle. Claire didn't hush her, not because she didn't want to, but because her throat had nothing left to give, just breath, shallow and steady. Ava, only 3 but fierce in her emotions, reacted first. Her little face turned red with cold and weariness. She burrowed into Claire's chest, lips trembling, trying to hold back tears, but failing. Her sobs shattered the stillness like glass under pressure. "Mommy, Mommy, I'm cold." She said it while pulling Claire's hand to her chest, fingers clenched tightly, desperate. Claire untied her scarf, trembling, and wrapped it around Ava's tiny body with numb, fumbling fingers. "I know, baby. Mommy's here." Eli was different. He hadn't spoken at all, not during the walk through freezing rain, not when she carried him for over an hour in soaked clothes. His silence wasn't from fear. It was deeper. He didn't cry, didn't question. He just watched, eyes too wide, too knowing. The kind of stare that didn't belong to a child, but to someone quietly waiting for the world to collapse. Behind his left ear was a faint birthmark, shaped like a droplet of water. Claire used to call it his brave drop, a small miracle in a world full of cracks. He had always been thoughtful, still, observant. Claire once said he was quiet like a lake at dawn. But tonight, his silence frightened her. He didn't flinch when she laid him down, didn't complain about the wet clothes clinging to his skin. He just kept his eyes on her, as if reading every movement, every breath. Claire pulled both children close, wrapping herself around them like a fortress made of bone and willpower. To her left, Ava shook, clinging like a lifeline. To her right, Eli lay still, awake, listening to her heartbeat, to his sister's soft sobs, to the wind scraping like claws across the tin roof above them. Claire didn't know she was trying to warm her children or just trying to stay conscious. Her hand moved instinctively, beneath Ava's neck, then across Eli's back. He felt colder than she'd feared, thinner, too still. But her hands no longer registered touch. All she had left was instinct. She leaned back against the wall, eyelids heavy, breath shallow, wrists numb. Her vision dimmed. Ava hiccuped, barely more than a whisper now. "Mommy, don't fall asleep." Claire nodded slowly, her smile soft, broken. "I won't. I'm not sleeping." But she was. She could feel herself sleeping. Eli saw it too. He sat up, not in panic, but with quiet certainty. He leaned over, placed his hand on her cheek. Her skin was cold. Her arms no longer wrapped around him like before. He studied her face for a long moment, memorizing it, as if he knew something was about to change. He couldn't call for help, couldn't light a fire, but he had one thing left to give. He leaned in close, voice nothing more than breath. "Please, don't leave me, Mommy." It wasn't a cry. It wasn't just a whisper. It was everything. Fear, love, desperation, wrapped in 4 small words, spoken by a boy who had never learned how to beg someone to stay. The shed stayed dark. The roof groaned under the weight of rain. The world didn't pause. But in that quiet space, between survival and surrender, one small heartbeat pulsed with enough strength to change the fate of all 3. The first cold night of the season. A black Range Rover moved slowly down the muddy path toward the long-abandoned Grayson farm. Its headlights cut through bare trees, revealing a weathered house standing lonely in the center of an open clearing. The rain had just stopped. The valley held its breath. Behind the wheel sat Nathaniel Grayson, 45, sharp, wealthy, self-made, a man who owned skyscraper views and boardroom silence. But once, he had no name, no home, no one who ever stayed. This place, this forgotten stretch of land, was the only place he had ever been chosen. He was 6 when a quiet farmer took him in after a storm. The man died when Nathaniel was 19, and Nathaniel left. He never came back, not until tonight. The SUV stopped in front of the porch. Nathaniel turned off the ignition and sat still, the soft cabin light revealing a face marked by years of silence. No one knew why a man like him would return to this ghost of a home. Maybe not even Nathaniel. Only that something inside him, some thread long ignored, had pulled him back, to confront whatever still lingered. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. He pulled his coat tighter. Waiting at the porch was Maggie Jean, late 50s, thin, tough, eyes sharp. She'd cared for the man who once raised him and never left. "Welcome home, Nate," she said with a quiet smile. "Still smells like old hay, still cold as ever." "I don't remember it ever being warm," Nathaniel said quietly, his eyes drifting past the porch, past the barren trees, to the wooden storage shed hidden in the mist and shadows. Maggie followed his gaze, then gently led him inside the house. The kitchen held a soft warmth, fireplace still crackling, the scent of ginger and old wood filling the air. A mug of steaming tea waited on the table, just like she used to prepare for him when he was a boy. But Nathaniel didn't sit. He stood by the window, unmoving, watching, listening. "There was a strange sound earlier," Maggie murmured, At first I thought it was a stray cat, but it didn't sound right. It was steady, rhythmic, like a child crying from the back shed. Nathaniel didn't respond at first, but Maggie noticed his fingers tighten around the ceramic mug. His eyes, distant, had already gone somewhere far, somewhere he hadn't visited in years. "Do you want me to check?" "No, I'll go." He slipped his coat back on. His shoes were still wet. The air outside was thick with fog, the wind sharp enough to sting. With every step toward the shed, Nathaniel's pulse pounded harder, not out of fear, but because a part of him already knew. This time, someone would be on the other side of that door. The shed looked unchanged. Sagging roof, molded planks, hinges so rusted they seemed fused to time. He wrapped his hand around the iron handle, turned it. The door creaked, and then he froze. Musty air hit him first, then the sharp scent of straw, then the unmistakable weight of human presence. But what rooted him to the spot wasn't the air, or the smell, or even the memories. It was them. A woman, barely conscious, slumped against the wall. 2 children beside her, one curled up sleeping soundly, the other sitting up, awake, watching. The boy didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He didn't seem afraid, just watchful, like he was silently asking, "Who are you? And what are you going to do now?" Nathaniel stepped inside, slowly. Every step felt like walking through a ghost. He had once laid there too, on that very straw, cold and shaking, not knowing if he'd make it through the night. But back then, no one had come. Now, he was the one opening the door. He knelt beside them, carefully took off his coat, laid it over the woman and the children. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the crushing weight of a moment he had never been able to rewrite in his own life. And yet, maybe, this was his chance to change someone else's. Claire was breathing, faint but steady. Ava stirred in her sleep. Eli remained perfectly still, eyes locked on Nathaniel like he could read his soul. Nathaniel gently rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Eli didn't pull away. Between them, an unspoken truth. One man who was never chosen. One child who didn't yet know how to trust. "I'm here now," Nathaniel said softly, his voice rough but grounded. "You're safe." Eli didn't reply, but he nodded, just enough to say, "I hear you." Nathaniel moved with careful strength. He lifted Claire onto his back, scooped Ava into his arms, then turned to Eli. "Can you walk?" Eli nodded again, quieter this time. He stepped forward, fingers latching onto the hem of his mother's coat, the same way he had held onto it all night, like a lifeline. Outside, Maggie already had the car door open. The cabin light spilled onto the yard, catching the pale glow of Claire's face. She didn't ask questions, just tucked a dry blanket, a warm towel, and a packet of ginger tea into a paper bag. Silent kindness. The kind that knows when words are too heavy. As the SUV pulled away, its headlights cast long, fleeting shadows across the grass. The shed door remained ajar. The wind lifted a loose piece of straw, carrying it gently into the night. Inside the car, Eli sat silent. He turned back one last time, looking at the shed, at the darkness that no longer frightened him. Nathaniel looked too, not at the building, but at the peace of himself he'd just reclaimed. There are doors in life some people spend forever wishing someone would open for them. And then, one day, after surviving, after growing, after learning what it means to be left behind, they come back and they open that door for someone else. Claire awoke to a pale, golden morning. The ceiling above her was wood, old but clean. No sirens, no shouting, just the hush of wind brushing the walls and the faint scent of magnolia carried on the warmth of a fireplace. The mattress beneath her was soft. Her clothes were dry. Her bones still ached, but the soul-deep cold was gone, replaced by quiet, by calm. A thick blanket had been wrapped around her shoulders. Then it hit her. The storm, the shed, Ava crying, Eli whispering. Claire jolted upright, fists clenched in the blanket. "Where are my children?" The door opened. A tall man stepped inside. Simple cotton shirt, calm presence. His voice was steady. "Next room. Both still sleeping. They're safe." Claire's breath slowed, but her eyes stayed sharp, fixed on him. She didn't recognize him yet, not as the man who had once waited in the dark for a door to open, and had now become the one who answered it. Where are we?" Claire's voice was groggy, uncertain. "Grayson Farm," the man replied gently. "After I found you in the shed last night, the town doctor cleared you and the kids, said you were all stable enough to recover here. The children were okay, no fevers. You, on the other hand, completely exhausted. You've been asleep since 2 a.m. Claire glanced around the room, small, warm. A soft reading lamp glowed on the nightstand. A folded towel rested neatly on a chair. Nothing grand, but everything felt intentional, human, safe. She turned back to the man. "You were the one who found us?" He nodded. Nathaniel Grayson. This is my farm." Claire gave him a small nod, half gratitude, half not knowing what else to say. He didn't press for more, he simply sat there, calm and patient, someone who clearly understood the art of letting broken things find their own way back. There was no pressure, just space. After a long, quiet pause, she whispered, "I didn't think we were going to make it through that night." Nathaniel moved to the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "You got your children out of the storm," he said steadily. "That's all I need to call you a mother in every sense of the word." Claire lowered her head. The tears came quick, uncontrolled, raw, not from fear, but because, for the first time in so long, she could speak without defending herself. "They threw me out, in the middle of the night." Her voice cracked. "Just me, a canvas bag, and 2 sleeping babies in my arms." Nathaniel didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. "Their names are Eli and Ava," she added softly, as though saying it aloud might anchor her back into reality. "They're twins, just turned 3. Eli's the older one, quiet, sensitive. He sees more than he says." She exhaled shakily. "They're good kids. They deserve more than I've been able to give them. I carry that guilt every single day." Nathaniel said nothing, but his eyes held the weight of listening, not as a stranger but as someone holding on to every syllable like it mattered. Claire's hands tightened in her lap. "Last night when I passed out, I heard Eli whisper, 'Mommy, please don't leave me.'" Her voice trembled. "I don't know what brought you back to that shed, Nathaniel, but if it was anything, maybe it was that voice." Nathaniel's reply came soft but rooted, steady. It was that voice. He looked at her fully now. "It pulled me out of memories I thought I had buried forever." Claire stared at him, stunned. He met her gaze and then said it. "I was left in that same shed when I was 6. Same cold, same silence. But no one came for me." Her breath caught. "And now you've come back," she whispered. "Not to relive it," he said gently, to make sure that if anyone else ever ended up there, they wouldn't have to go through it alone. In the next room, a small figure stirred. Eli quietly slipped from beneath his blanket. 3 years old, soft curls, wide, thoughtful eyes. He didn't call out, just padded to the doorway, pressing his cheek to the frame, silently watching his mother. Awake, safe. Claire's eyes found him instantly. Her voice softened. "Eli," she called. He hesitated, cautious, but stepped into the room, tiny feet moving slowly. He didn't shy away from Nathaniel, but kept a careful distance, the kind only children understand when they're learning the shape of trust. "Mommy's okay now," Claire whispered, pulling him into her arms. From the next room, a soft rustle. Ava sat up, still clutching the frayed edge of her blanket. "Where's Mommy?" she asked, rubbing her eyes, voice sleepy. Claire smiled through the tears. "Right here, baby. Mommy's right here." Little feet pattered across the hallway. Ava ran into the room and launched herself into Claire's arms, holding on as if she never wanted to let go again. Nathaniel stepped back quietly. He understood this was a moment for them, not for him. The door opened once more. A woman entered, older, sturdy, with clear eyes and the kind of presence that told you she'd been taking care of people long before they even realized they needed it. She carried a tray with tea, warm towels folded neatly. "Good morning, Miss Matthews," she greeted warmly. "I'm Maggie Jean, the housekeeper. Chamomile and ginger tea, good for the lungs, better for the nerves." Claire gave her a soft, grateful smile. "Thank you, Maggie. Just Maggie's fine." The older woman grinned. "Your little girl told me this place has no ghosts. I took it as the highest compliment." Claire laughed, and it felt like the first real one in days. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like, or the next week, or the next year, but right now her children were safe. They were warm, and they were not alone. And sometimes, in a world that so often takes more than it gives, all that takes is one person staying to change everything. If you've read this far, maybe this moment reached a part of you, too. Maybe you've woken up in an unfamiliar place, unsure of what comes next. Maybe you've silently wished someone would sit beside you, say nothing, and just not leave. If so, tell me your story. I'm listening. 3 days after the storm, the Grayson farm began to stir with life again. Ava sat on the living room floor, doodling with a crayon on the back of a cardboard box. Maggie set a plate of cookies beside her and returned to wiping down the kitchen table. Eli didn't say much. He sat nearby, quiet, always watching his mother. Claire was folding laundry alongside Maggie. Her hands were steadier now. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear, no longer dulled by fear or sleepless nights. Maggie glanced toward the children and spoke gently.
"Little Ava's a joy. Eli, he's a quiet one. But you look close and you'll see he's a lot like the boss used to be."
Claire looked over. A soft smile touched her lips.
"I think Eli carries the weight of someone who's survived more than he should have." Maggie paused, thoughtful. "That's exactly how Nathaniel survived, too. When he first came here, he didn't speak for almost 3 months, just sat by the window, watching." Claire nodded. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know where we're going next." "I don't know where we'll go from here," Claire said quietly. "But I do know I can't keep dragging my kids from place to place. If it's possible, I'd like to stay a little longer." Her voice was calm but worn at the edges, like someone who had learned to ask without expecting. "I'll help with the cooking, laundry, anything. I'm not asking for charity. I'll earn our keep." Maggie, folding towels at the kitchen table, gave her a knowing smile. "You'll have to speak to Mr. Nathaniel about that," she said, pausing to smooth the linen. "But I will tell you this. This house hasn't felt this peaceful in years, not until you and those little ones came through that door." Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Claire padded softly into the living room. The fire in the hearth still glowed low. Nathaniel sat nearby, a leather-bound journal in hand, a steaming mug of tea resting beside him. "You're still up?" Claire asked gently. Without turning, he answered, "I am," then added after a pause, "Something on your mind?" Claire sat across from him, spine straight but gaze soft. The firelight flickered across her face, casting shadows beneath her tired eyes. "I never said thank you." Her voice was low. "Not just for taking us in, but for not asking questions, not judging us, even when we showed up out of nowhere." Nathaniel nodded, still looking into the fire. "I used to hate being questioned, so I try not to do it now." Claire looked down at her hands. "We don't have anywhere else to go. If it's okay, I'd like to stay a while longer. I don't have any special skills, but I won't let anyone feed my children for free." Nathaniel turned to her at last, not judging, just observing, listening. "This house used to be cold," he said, "not because of the weather, but because it had no one living in it, not really. You and the kids, you're welcome here, as long as you need." Claire's smile came slowly, not out of habit, but something real and shy and quietly grateful. One evening after dinner, Nathaniel sat on the floor with Ava and Eli, laughing as they colored together. Claire watched from the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight. They weren't just smiling, they were happy, in a way she hadn't seen in years. Maggie noticed too. She leaned in close to Claire and whispered, "It's been a long, long time since this house or that man felt this warm." Claire looked at Nathaniel again. Ava held up a crayon like a trophy, beaming, and he clapped for her like it was the greatest thing in the world. For the first time, Claire let herself think, if only their real father had ever treated them like this. Maggie caught the flicker of sadness in her eyes. She rested a gentle hand over Claire's. "Go to them," she said. "Your heart needs healing too. You deserve every good thing the world still has to offer." Claire nodded, eyes glassy with tears she didn't try to hide. Gratitude and grief swelled inside her. Maggie left them then, quietly, as if she knew this was a moment meant only for the four of them. Claire entered the room, wiping away a tear, not the kind born only of pain, but peace too. She sat beside her children, watched them play. Then she turned to Nathaniel, not as a broken woman, but as someone finally unafraid to show the cracks. With a steady voice, she told him about Mark. Charming at first, hollow later. About her mother-in-law, Darlene, who treated her like an ungrateful inconvenience. About nights spent sleeping in the hallway, clutching her babies while Mark drank himself numb. And about the night they were thrown out. All she had time to grab was a bottle, a blanket, and her children. Nathaniel didn't interrupt. He just listened. And in the way she spoke, fingers tightening slightly, shoulders hunched protectively, he recognized something. The same quiet fear that once lived inside him, the same posture he had as a boy, peering through the slats of that shed wall, watching a girl cling to her mother's skirt and hoping someone would open the door. He didn't know for sure, but his heart did. Something had shifted. The next morning, with a light rain tapping gently against the windows, Nathaniel picked up the phone and called his attorney. "I want everything you can find on Mark Wallace and Darlene. Dig deep. I want what they've tried to bury." 3 days later, a thick brown folder arrived. It smelled faintly of paper, ink, and cold. Nathaniel didn't open it right away. He let it sit on the table in the quiet room where only the clock ticked steadily in the background. Then, with a sigh, he poured himself coffee, opened the file. Page 1. Mark Wallace, accused of domestic violence, 2016, case dropped after private settlement. Page 2. Maternity benefits denied to Claire Matthews. The signature on the rejection form didn't match hers. It was Darlene's. Page 3. ER visit. Claire Matthews admitted with a fractured rib, listed as a fall. No investigation. Nathaniel set the page down. In the distance, he heard Ava laughing. He turned. Claire was in the kitchen, hair soft in the morning light, making tea. Ava sat on the counter, giggling as a cookie broke in her hands and crumbled to the floor. He watched them, remembered the shed, the boy he was, the girl who smiled like Ava. Back then, he hadn't been able to open the door. This time, he would not leave them behind. Claire entered the room and noticed the folder. Nathaniel didn't speak, just slid it toward her. She didn't touch it right away, just read the top line and froze. She understood. Someone had finally dragged the truth out of the dark. Claire sat down, turned the pages. Her hands trembled, but her eyes, clear. Every line she read was another stitch, not pain, but healing. When she finished, she looked up. Her voice was calm, unshaken. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said. "I'm doing it because I spent 3 years thinking I was the only one." She looked toward the kitchen. Ava was still laughing. "I can't let the next one be a mother who doesn't survive." Nathaniel watched her, then nodded slowly. "I'll handle my part," he said. "You just keep living. Raising your kids, that's the hard part." Claire smiled, not out of politeness, but from a place that had long been dark, now beginning to glow again. Some people don't want you back out of love. They want you back because they hate losing control. Mark Wallace was one of those people. For the past 3 weeks, he had proudly called it freedom. No Claire, no crying twins, just silence and beer. That illusion cracked the moment Darlene handed him a note from someone at her church. Claire had been spotted near the Grayson Medical Clinic, close to Grayson Farm. "Nathaniel Grayson?" Mark asked, cold creeping into his voice. "That's the one," Darlene said. "You know, the millionaire farmer, the one with that regenerative ranch that was in Forbes last year." Mark said nothing, but that night he made a quiet call to a private investigator a friend had once recommended. "I'm looking for my ex-wife, Claire Matthews, probably in Grayson County, with twin kids. What do you want to know?" "Everything. And especially the man she's living with." 3 days later, the report arrived. A photo, Claire in a sunlit yard, Ava in her arms, Eli crouched nearby, beside a tall man sharpening a plow beneath the porch steps. The image was grainy, but clear enough to tighten Mark's throat. Attached was a full background file on Nathaniel Grayson. Mark stared at it, cigarette burning between his fingers. And then he smirked. "Well, well, Claire. You sure know how to land on your feet." He grabbed his keys, climbed into his SUV, and headed for Grayson. At the Grayson farm, winter wind slid through the tall pines. The trees whispered in the hush of silver morning light. Ava sat on the porch, lining up small acorns in neat, careful rows. Eli was beside her, carving a wooden spoon for Maggie. His hands were steady, quiet, focused. Neither of them knew the past was driving toward them. But Nathaniel would be ready. Claire stood at the window, drying the last dish. No makeup, no armor. For once, no tension coiled in her shoulders. It was the first slow morning she'd allowed herself in years. Then, the crunch of tires, not loud, but loud enough to break the stillness. Eli's head lifted first, his hand freezing mid-cut with the wooden carving knife. Ava turned too, glancing at her brother, then to their mother. Claire didn't move, just for a second, then quietly set the glass aside. She wiped her hands on her apron, heartbeat ticking faster with every step to the door. The gate was still open. A black SUV pulled in, its tires leaving deep red tracks in the wet clay. The driver's door opened. Mark stepped out, white dress shirt buttoned high, hair slicked back. One hand held a plastic box of cookies, the other, a colorful gift bag meant for a child. His eyes swept the yard slowly, appraising everything, like a man inspecting a piece of property he believed he still owned. "Claire," he said, voice low, falsely warm. A kind of warmth that stuck like smoke, thick, clinging, impossible to wash away. Claire stepped outside. Her legs stiffened for just a beat, then moved forward, not welcoming, just present. The children followed on instinct. Eli stepped in front of Ava, gently pulling her behind him. "You look good," Mark said with a half smile. "Not quite the last image I had of you." Claire didn't answer. She stood in the doorway, still, unmoved. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice flat. "To see my kids," he replied. "You don't get to hide them from me, Claire. I'm still their father. The law says that means something." From inside the house, the sound of a floorboard creaked. Nathaniel stepped outside, calm, quiet. He moved to Claire's right, placing one hand gently on her shoulder. The wind shifted. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson," he said. "This is my land. If you have business here, speak through a lawyer." Mark's smirk twisted. "So this is it," he scoffed. "You found yourself a rich farm boy to play house with." Claire said nothing, not because she was scared, because he didn't deserve even the sound of her voice. "You left us in a storm," she said finally. "You called me a whore, smashed a milk bottle in front of our daughter, and now you show up with cookies and expect to play dad?" Mark's jaw tightened. "I said I was sorry. You can't keep them from me forever." From behind the door, Ava's soft cries echoed. Eli appeared in the doorway, one small hand gripping the frame. His voice was quiet, but each word struck like a blade. "Don't let him inside, Mommy." Mark turned toward the boy, forcing a wide, insincere smile. "Eli, it's Dad. I just came to visit." Eli didn't respond. He only stepped backward, pulling Ava protectively closer. Claire stepped forward, voice steady. "You don't get to walk in here and call them yours. You didn't raise them. You didn't protect them. You didn't even ask. You didn't raise them. You didn't protect them. You didn't even ask if they were alive. So tell me, what exactly are you to them?" Mark flushed, eyes narrowing. "I'll sue you. I'll fight for custody." Nathaniel stepped between them, blocking the door. "Then we'll settle it in court," he said calmly. "But don't come back here again unless you've got a subpoena, and if you take one more step on this land, I'll remove you myself." His voice never rose. It didn't have to. It was the kind of strength that came from knowing you didn't need to shout to be heard. Mark's smirk faltered. He looked from Nathaniel to Claire. "You think he'll let you stay here forever?" Claire met his gaze, cool, clear, unwavering, longer than you ever did. Mark swallowed, jaw twitching. He looked toward the house one last time, not with concern, but like a man losing a bet he thought he'd already won. Then he turned, climbed into the SUV, and drove off. Behind him, the smell of burnt rubber lingered in the driveway, and something colder still, the air left behind when a storm refuses to admit its past. Claire collapsed onto the porch steps, wiping sweat from her brow. Her heart thundered like it had sprinted through a fire. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Nathaniel stepped outside. He found Eli sitting alone, knees tucked to his chest, eyes on the stars. After a while, Eli whispered, "Uncle Nathaniel, Mommy cries in her room sometimes. She thinks we're asleep. I don't want her to cry anymore." Nathaniel sat beside him. He didn't speak right away. Then gently, he pulled the boy into his arms. Ava wandered out next, half asleep, clutching her pillow. Nathaniel gathered them both close. "I promise," he said, "no one will hurt your mom again, not ever." Claire stood at the door, frozen, hands trembling. She didn't step forward, didn't speak, but the tears came anyway, not from fear, not from weakness, but because, for the first time in her life, someone else was holding her children when she couldn't. The next morning, the sky turned heavy with gray. The wind whispered of something darker rolling in. A storm was coming, and not just weather. On the table, the thick file on Mark and Darlene lay open. Nathaniel turned another page. Each line made the truth harder to deny. Claire stood behind him, her hand tight on the back of the chair, eyes forward. "It's time," she said. Nathaniel nodded. Time to stop leaving everything behind closed doors. At dawn, the Grayson farm was up early. No one said much, but they all moved like people who understood what the day would bring. Nagy made breakfast, boiled eggs, cornbread. Ava nibbled in small bites. Eli spun the wooden spoon in his hand, head down, but his eyes never left the door. Maggie placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You don't have to worry, sweetheart," she whispered. "Your mama and Uncle Nathaniel know what they're doing. They'll do what's right." Eli looked up at her, voice low but sure. "I want to go." Claire had been standing just behind the doorway. She heard him. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "There'll be a lot of people," she said softly. "Some might say things that aren't kind. It might get loud." Eli met her gaze, then spoke words that made the whole room still. "I don't need to talk, but if I sit beside you, they'll know you're not alone." Maggie rose, her voice like a prayer. "Then we all go. No one gets left behind." Jefferson County Courthouse. The hearing room was small, ceiling high, wood dark, quiet as a chapel. Claire entered first. White button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back. No makeup, no jewelry, only a notebook in her hand, filled with names of wounds that had never been seen, let alone treated. Eli and Ava sat quietly with Maggie in the second row. Nathaniel walked beside Claire. He didn't say much, but his presence said everything. They had come to fight, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. And they were not alone. Mark sat across the aisle, black suit, red tie, clean-shaven. On the surface, he looked like a polished businessman, but his eyes betrayed the truth, bitter, entitled, and possessive. Darlene sat beside him in a stiff black dress, her snakeskin purse clutched tightly in her lap. She looked at Claire the way one might glance at a returned package. No surprise, no compassion, just the dull weight of old disdain. Then the door opened. Judge Albright entered. Early 60s, silver hair pulled back, posture as upright as iron. 30 years on the bench had earned her a reputation, the last door in family justice. She gave a single nod, no gavel, no need. Preliminary custody hearing, Matthews versus Wallace, she announced. We'll begin. Claire's attorney rose, opening the thick file with practiced precision. Your Honor, we submit the following evidence on behalf of Miss Matthews, he began. A medical report from Montana General dated 2019 confirms shoulder and rib injuries sustained by Ms. Matthews. A benefits denial form, proven to contain a forged signature traced to Darlene Wallace, and a recorded testimony from neighbors detailing the night of July 14th, when Mr. Wallace forced his wife and children out of their home. He pressed play on a small speaker. Get the hell out of my house. I'm done raising you and those kids. I know they're not even mine. Ava's sobs pierced the recording. Eli's voice followed, high-pitched and shaking. Mommy, don't go. Don't leave us. The courtroom stiffened. Darlene lowered her gaze. Mark didn't move, but his jaw twitched. Claire sat silently, eyes locked on the table. Her hands didn't tremble. Then Mark's lawyer stood. Your Honor, he began smoothly. My client acknowledges a history of emotional stress. However, he denies ever causing physical harm. Ms. Matthews left on her own. There was no coercion. Claire was called to the stand. No notes, no hesitation. Just her voice, low, steady, and full of resolve. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I couldn't let my children grow up thinking silence is the answer to violence. I used to bow my head, but they deserve to stand tall. Mark abruptly rose, interrupting. I lost my job. I was under pressure. I made mistakes, yes, but that doesn't make me a bad father. I just want to see my kids. Judge Albright flipped through his file. You were accused of assaulting a former girlfriend in 2016. Case dropped after a private settlement. That correct? Mark nodded stiffly. That was years ago. Old doesn't mean irrelevant, she replied. Her tone was sharp, but even. She turned to Claire's attorney, who stepped forward with another document. Handwriting analysis confirms the forged signature on the benefits form. It does not match Ms. Matthews. Fingerprint analysis links the forgery directly to Darlene Wallace. The judge gently closed the file. Her hand rested on it with finality. The room went still, like time had paused to listen. From the gallery, Eli reached for Claire's hand. Ava leaned over and whispered, Does the judge know Mommy's a good person? Eli answered, his eyes never leaving the bench. She knows, because today, Mommy didn't cry. Judge Albright spoke. This court finds that Mr. Mark Wallace inflicted both physical and emotional harm upon his wife and children. All parental rights, visitation, and custodial privileges are suspended indefinitely. Darlene Wallace's involvement in the forged document qualifies for criminal investigation under charges of fraud and falsification. Permanent and sole custody is granted to Claire Matthews. Psychological support services for the minors, Ava and Eli, are strongly recommended and approved. The courtroom doors creaked as a draft of cold winter air swept in. Mark lowered his head, jaw clenched. Darlene turned away, her shoulders stiff with shame, or pride too worked to bend. No one looked at them again. Claire sat, her hands wrapped around her children's. She didn't cry, but her eyes gleamed with something quieter than victory: release. The kind of light that shines when a lifelong weight is finally set down. Behind her, Nathaniel stood, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Maggie leaned toward Ava and whispered, "Your mommy did it." Eli looked at his mother, then turned to the doors, where daylight streamed through the cracks. "Now mommy doesn't have to run anymore," he said softly. "We're standing now." On the drive home, the car was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of silence that crushed. It was stillness, healing, unspoken peace. Claire sat in the back seat, Ava curled into her arms asleep. Eli watched the road, occasionally drawing smiley faces into the fog on the window. Crooked, uneven, just like the ones he used to draw on the shed wall, on nights when the only warmth was his mother's shallow breath. But now they were heading home, and this time they weren't alone. And this time he didn't fall asleep. Instead, he added arms, two reaching out, linking to others. 4 figures connected hand in hand. "I drew our family," Eli whispered. Claire gently brushed her fingers through his hair. She didn't speak, just smiled. Her first unguarded smile in what felt like forever. By 1 p.m., the Grayson farm peeked through the thinning pine trees. The Montana air was crisp and dry. Sunlight kissed the silver rooftops like frost made of gold. Maggie was first out of the car, Ava's wool scarf draped in her arms. She paused, breathing in the land as if it were perfume. "We're home," she murmured. "Now it really begins." Claire nodded. Her lips said nothing, but her eyes glistened, not with sorrow. She was just finally breathing fully, with lungs that felt like her own. Dinner was simple: warm chicken soup and soft cornbread. Claire ate in quiet reflection, often glancing at the children. Ava giggled, swinging her legs as Maggie shared a tale about Uncle Nathaniel's school-skipping wood-carving days. Eli didn't laugh. At the end of the table, he gripped a colored pencil and drew uneven smiley faces on a napkin. No two the same. Claire walked to him and gently rested her hand on the back of his neck over the small, teardrop-shaped birthmark hidden beneath his hair. "You're drawing them again." "Yeah," Eli said quietly. "I want to make a lot, so you won't be sad anymore." At the sink, Nathaniel paused. He gripped the counter so tightly his knuckles turned white, silently absorbing every word. The next afternoon, golden sunlight poured down the mountains, rich and slow like honey. Without needing to say it, all 4 of them made their way to the shed. Maggie carried a basket. Claire brought an old wooden broom. The children each held something of meaning. Ava, her crayons. Eli, a folded sheet of paper clutched to his chest. The shed still looked like a shed, but the roof had been patched, the rotten wood replaced. Inside, the air no longer smelled like mildew or decay. It smelled like memory, clean, sharp, undeniable. Claire was the first to enter. She touched the doorway, fingertips brushing wood like greeting an old ghost. She inhaled, deep and deliberate. The chill remained, but it didn't bite. It remembered. Nathaniel stepped beside her. In his hands, he carried a polished wooden plaque. Carved into its surface, the words were deep and deliberate. "No one gets left behind." He leaned the plaque against the wall. The sound it made, soft but certain, rang like a vow. Claire began sweeping. Each stroke cleared not just dust, but history. Maggie unpacked old boxes, folded worn linens, sorted through tins from Nathaniel's childhood. Ava sat cross-legged near the doorway, drawing a golden sun at the threshold and humming an unnamed tune. Eli, quiet and precise, unfolded his drawing. It was a smiley face, still imperfect, and a red heart beneath it, the color spilling outside the lines. He taped it to the wall. No one asked him to, but everyone stopped to look. Nathaniel walked over to Claire. Dust covered her hands, but her eyes were steady. "There's something I've meant to tell you," he said quietly. Claire looked up, still kneeling, their eyes locked, right there in the room where both had once been lost.